Time to really get started now. I apologize for the miscommunication. I was just trying to get everybody a chance to get here 15 minutes before we started. So hopefully everybody got my email regarding that too. We do have this room reserved for also November 3rd and November 17th. Same time slot. And we are welcome to use it if we need it for additional meetings. They're very gracious to have us or host us in here. Also, well, I'm going to call the meeting to order first. I guess I should do that. So at 6:30, we're officially called to order the October 20th Raytown Charter Commission meeting. Lisa, would you take roll call, please?
Jim Azure.
Here.
Ted Bowman.
Here.
Susan Dolan. Janet Emerson.
Here.
Lisa Emerson here. Jason Green.
Here.
Steve Gunther.
Here.
Sandra Hartwell.
Here.
Michael McDonough.
Here.
Charlotte Melson.
Here.
Mark Moore.
Here.
Mary Jane Van Buskirk.
Here.
Greg Walters.
Greg is absent. Okay. Also, we'll now open this part of the meeting up for public comment. If anybody would like to make public comment. Randy, Michael, any? Okay. All right, so seeing none, we'll go ahead and continue with officers' report. I'll continue as for the chair. I did get the RFP for legal services sent out. It's been in Randy's paper. I think it should have also been in the Eagle, and it's going to be also in next week's papers, so that the advertisement follows along in the guidelines that we're required to do. I've also talked with, hey Greg, Mr. Markison from the MML. As I mentioned in my email, I got 3 attorneys' names from him directly, and I've talked to each one of them personally on the phone and sent them a copy of the RFP, and they're all 3 appearing like they're going to be submitting their request in. In talking with Mr. Markison also, he graciously volunteered to review our charter draft before we actually give it to the attorney, so that if there was anything glaring or something that we needed to include or maybe make comment on, we could make that happen. And so I thought that, at no charge, by the way, just to let everybody know, he just volunteered that service, and I thought that was very nice of him. Yeah, Mr. Markison. And so that, I mean, I think that all went really well. And hopefully we'll get some more responses besides those 3. I mean, I think I sent everybody the final RFP. And so if there's attorneys that you know that you think would be interested in giving us a response, that would be greatly appreciated to get that out to them. And I know, Greg, you asked to sit on that subcommittee to review those, and Sandy, I think in our conversation you thought you would too. If there's anybody else that would like to, Mary Jane, thank you.
I will.
Okay, I mean, yeah, now what that's going to do is, if we get 6 or 7 responses, we'd probably like to narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then make recommendations to the board to have them come in and actually do an interview with us, so that we can, everybody will have a chance to ask questions to those attorneys. Yes, Mary Jane?
Steve, I think the city has some kind of a website or something they use where they post jobs outside of the city. Have you talked to Teresa about possibly posting there?
I talked to Teresa. She doesn't, well, we can see if we can get it posted there, yeah. She didn't seem to, she seems to think that this is our deal and not so much the city's, and so to get them to do too much.
When I talked to her, she sounded like she would.
Well, and it was sent to her so that she could post it, so I'll contact her tomorrow and make sure she knows that. But everything seems to be going pretty well there. And then when we get into old business will go forward from there, so, yes.
There's a magazine that MML puts out, and in the back of it, it has different jobs that different cities need to have filled. I don't know if they're gonna put it in that or not, but have.
Mr. Markinson didn't say anything about that, but I can ask him if
That
he...
only goes out monthly, so I'm thinking,
Oh, well, we
That
don't.
may be a
yeah,
problem.
I think
Yeah.
it's too late.
We don't know
Okay.
for that.
Okay, all right,
And they usually have a month
Yeah.
ahead before.
all right.
Good.
Yes.
The applicants that you've seen yet?
I have 3 so far.
3?
Yeah.
How do they get their application to you?
No, I haven't got any response back from them. Mr. Markinson gave me 3 names, and I contacted all 3 individuals, and then talked to them, and then sent them the RFP so that they could respond to it, but we haven't gotten anything.
Where do they respond to when they do?
Who?
Where?
It goes to the city offices and is reserved for the Charter Commission to pick up. The RFP's got an address and everything, yeah. All right.
Received them, could you forward them on?
Yes, once we get all of them by the due date, then we will put them together, and,
Oh, right.
yeah.
Yeah, they're sealed, they would have to be opened,
Yeah.
and then,
They'd be opened by the subcommittee and reviewed, yeah. All right, secretary's report,
Got nothing,
minutes.
other
Minutes?
than the minutes, yeah.
All right. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? I know there was one update to them. Does anybody see any other corrections? Seeing none, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion, we approve.
Thank you, Janet.
Second.
Thank you, Jason. Take a vote.
Mary Jane Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Lisa Emerson, yes. Jason Green.
Yes.
Mark Moore.
Yes.
Steve Gunther.
Yes.
Janet Emerson.
Yes.
Sandra Hartwell. Charlotte Nelson.
yes.
Greg Walters. Oh, well. Ted Bowman.
Yes.
Michael McDonough.
Yes.
Jim Asia.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Any update on the treasurer's report, Mark?
Well, I've been behind the times here, Steve, so I think it's still the same.
Okay.
I don't know if you spent any money, I don't think you have.
Well, I might have spent a little bit with Randy, but not much.
$3 or something?
Yeah, just to get the advertisement out.
More than that, but not much.
And then, so, seeing that it hasn't really changed yet, we'll leave it as it is.
We'll leave it as it is.
Old business, we kind of discussed that, I gave you updates. Is there any other old business we need to talk about before we get started? The only thing I can think of is the 6 individuals that wanted to get together on the marketing committee. I'd like you guys to, in the next couple weeks, maybe have your first meeting so that we can start getting that organized. And I think I sent all 6 of you documentation from West Plains, what they did for marketing.
Can you list who's on there? 'Cause I'm-
Charlotte, you are on there. Janet Emerson, Susan Dolan volunteered, Michael McDonough, Sandra Hartwell, Charlotte, myself. And so, yes, great.
You have room for one more?
Yeah, I mean, well, that would make 7. So that would
Oh,
count.
Susan's on there.
Yeah, Susan's on there, so we can substitute you for Susan at this point. I think. All right. So again, I guess that would be Janet, then Emerson, Greg Walters, Michael McDonough, Sandra Hartwell, Charlotte Nelson, and myself.
When and how is the meeting going to be chosen?
Well, that's up to the group. I mean, is there anybody that would like to chair that position? Or that group? Janet? All right, thank you. Can you then go ahead and try to find a date that everybody's comfortable with, and then we can get our first meeting? I'm sorry?
Let the whole commission,
Yeah, let the whole commission know. Yeah.
not during the royal play hour.
Yeah, I know, it's tough right
Not
now.
tomorrow night.
Yeah, not tomorrow night or anytime this week, right? Okay. Any other old business? All right, seeing none, we'll get into new business. And we're going to be looking at Article 10, which is initiative, referendum, and recall. This is something that, again, initiative, referendum are directly out of the MML. Recall is a section that is actually in every charter that I've reviewed so far, and I have brought all those charters here, so if anybody would like to look at them. And most of the wordage in here, again, or I should say almost all the wordage is straight out of the MML with few exceptions, other than when they get to a point where there's numbers involved or a method of actually petitioning that is addressed. So does anybody else have this that would like to read? My voice is kind of hoarse right now.
Steve, you gonna make a copy of that?
I
and
don't-
get it?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
You take turns being around the room.
Yeah, that'd be great, because,
You weren't here last.
and what I'm going to suggest is when we get to a point where it actually has like numbers or something like that, I'm going to give you numbers from all the charters that I've reviewed. And then I asked Lisa and Janet to get together a history of the voting that's taken place the last, in August 2014, or, anyway, the last couple of voter histories, so that we have an idea how many people voted, and also how many are registered and so forth, so we can use those numbers to decide which numbers we need to have in our information.
Number discussions occur in this first section.
Only on recall. But that 6-month period is a standard period.
I just asked because
Yeah.
I was going to read straight through it.
That'd be fine. So you're going to read straight through 10.1?
Yes.
All right, that'd be fine.
General authority. A, initiative. Qualified voters of the city shall have the power to propose ordinances to the Board of Aldermen, and if the Board of Aldermen fails to adopt an ordinance so proposed without any changes in substance, to adopt or reject if at a municipal election, provided that such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program, any ordinance relating to the levy of taxes, zoning, or salaries of city employees, or any ordinance relating to any appropriation of money, unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore. The term city employees in this section shall not include elected officials. A proposed initiative ordinance shall contain only one subject, which shall be clearly expressed in its title. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. B, referendum. Qualified voters of the city shall have the power to require reconsideration by the Board of Aldermen of any adopted ordinance, and if the Board of Aldermen fails to repeal an ordinance so reconsidered, to approve or reject it at a municipal election, provided that such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program, any emergency ordinance, any zoning or land use issues, or any ordinance levying a special assessment or providing for the issuance of special tax bills, appropriation of money, levy of taxes, or salaries of city officers and employees. The term city employees in this section shall not include elected officials. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. C, recall. Any elected official, whether popularly elected or appointed, may be removed by qualified voters. No elected official shall be subject to recall within 6 months after induction into office, nor during the last 6 months of the official's term. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. If the elected official is retained in office upon any recall election, the official shall not again be subject to recall during the same term of office. That is the form here
Yeah.
where it shows the.
And I'm gonna add one quick sentence to the end of that. And there was a suggestion by Lisa, it should say, the balloting, or the ballot wording shall be semicolon or, yeah.
And then just where it says budget or capital program,
Yeah.
suggested city,
So,
just so we know it's the city
Okay,
budget,
you can-
not
you can
something
tell them
else's.
that, yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
My suggestion was when it says, provided that such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program, I suggested putting in city, so we know it's the city budget we're talking about, but I don't know if it could be misconstrued as something else, so.
On each one of them?
That happens in A and B. It's about a few lines, fourth line down on A and fourth line down on B.
The city budget.
Budget or capital program, I just put city in front of it. So-
And on C, it was on C as well. What was it? I never see.
No, it's. I don't
Or I'm
think so.
sorry, B you said?
Yeah, A and B, A and B.
It's four sentences down
line,
on
yeah.
B as well, okay.
Okay.
Somebody ventured to, I don't want to say, let's define capital program. What do we mean by that?
The actual capital program, I mean, that's the program that the city administrator puts together with the Board of Aldermen that we talked about back in the
Is that what
city
we're calling
ministry.
it?
Or
Well,
investment of money.
investment of money, yeah.
Well, we should probably find out what we're
And
calling
that
it.
you retain this backup money is oftentimes invested with the capital program.
So, you think we need a definition for it?
Well, I'm not really clear. Is this common language in all of them?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you're welcome to take a look at
No,
any
I'll
of
take
them.
your word for it.
Well, what are
So-
we calling it in here?
What if, like, for instance, you have an initiative petition that asks for restrictions upon issuance of new tax deferments or tax abatements? Would that fall under the budget or capital program?
I have no idea. I mean,
It falls under any ordinance relating to the levy of taxes,
Right.
zoning, or salaries of city employees.
I can answer your question, Greg. What we approved for the city administrator, it says, prepare and submit a recommended annual budget and a 5-year capital improvement program. So maybe we should change this to capital
CIP is what it is,
improvement.
that's why I was.
So if we could put in.
I disagree with that. I don't think they're the same thing.
yeah.
Capital program is something that's defined by government fund accounting, and it's far more general
Oh, capital improvement
than a
program?
capital.
Ah,
improvement.
so.
That'd be like the sewer.
That's what I.
That's what we,
get at.
that's what we
I don't think
specify
really-
with the city administrator, so what should we do? Take it
I
out
think
or
the
change it?
definition of the term
Just leave it.
capital in government fund accounting includes anything that has to do with real estate or is over a defined set of monies. So it's really nothing to do with taxation as such.
What? I think
No,
I'm
it's a
lost.
capital program. It's
Well, what we approved for the city administrator is prepare and submit a recommended annual budget and 5-year capital improvement program.
what capital improvement program and a capital program are not the same.
But they're not the same thing, okay.
It's really nothing new, we've had them from way before we ever had a city administrator.
I'm
So what do you
inclined.
It's a CIP.
Yeah,
it's
I'm,
capital
well,
improvement
I'm
plan.
inclined to agree with Ted, but this may be something we have to highlight
Maybe
for
we
the
should
lawyer
highlight it and look at it.
too. I think that I'd feel comfortable if that was the case.
Okay, sounds good to me.
And
Even though I'm
again,
inclined to
it's,
agree with you.
yeah, and again, it's just, it's the way it's been worded in the MML and all the other charters. I mean, I was really amazed at how consistent the language was in reviewing them, so.
So what would an example of an initiative be?
The one I did would be, if the voters push the initiative petition, put in limitations upon certain actions by the Board of Aldermen in regard to tax abatements or so forth.
It's initiating legislation is what it is through the voter, through the ballot box as opposed to your board of aldermen.
And then an example of referendum?
To change an existing legislation through an act of the ballot.
Originally, when it was created in Wisconsin, initiative was where the voters could initiate a law by taking a petition and saying, we want this law, we want you to vote on it. And the referendum was if you voted it down, they could take up another petition with more signatures and say, we want the people to vote on this law. And if the people vote on it, it then becomes law. For example, if you took the smoking ban and you passed the initiative and you vote the smoking ban down, then the referendum would be, we take it to the voters, if they pass it, it then becomes law.
Yeah, so they can overturn
Right.
existing legislation through the council. And look, I've been pretty honest about some of the beliefs I've had with this charter in the first place, but to me, and I'm gonna state this as I've always stated, this is something I think that's every community that the charter has. I mean, why should I be afforded less democratic rights because I happen to live in Raytown? And that's my mentality about that, because I think that, again, this is an additional voter protection. I think it's also an additional avenue for voters to get their voices heard within this community.
So why even have a board of aldermen?
No, that's not the case. The point is, you have these checks to power. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, why have any city council than anywhere? Because these other cities have initiative process.
Have you looked at California and what kind of shape they're in with initiative, referendum, and recall? They're in a horrible shape out there. You got idiots running around getting petitions all the time. It's costing.
Well, here's the deal.
It's costing the state thousands.
Later on,
thousands
you
of
can
dollars.
talk about the threshold for the percentages for this. But I tend to have faith in a majority, not all, but in a majority of the voting public. My attitude about this, though, is if you want to debate, how do we get initiative, how do we get recall, how do we get referendum, we can talk about the thresholds and make them responsible so that not any crazy little initiative's going to pop up. And that's where I think we need to be responsible, because there's a financial liability there as well, with running all these special elections. But again, in my research with the other charters, through other documents, through other articles I was studying, everybody has this, and I really do. My frustration is that we don't have these powers in Raytown as a citizen. So because by living in Raytown, again, I happen to live here, I'm afforded less democratic rights. That doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah.
Just to maybe to answer the question that Virginie said, we don't have initiative, referendum, and recall at the national level, and there's probably a good reason for that. It was originally at the state level, and truly most people that have charters have either referendum or they have all three. And a good example of why that is because at the local level, it's really our neighborhoods, it's our city, it's our school system, our fire department. It is the thing that's closest to our backyard. And the city is the community we choose to live in. And why you might do that is, and I'll go back to this, what we call the Clean Air Act. When I ran for alderman on one particular election, a number of people whose doors I knocked on said to me, I really would like to see a smoking ban in Raytown. Well, there were certainly enough, I didn't count them all, but I'm going to say at least a couple dozen people said that. And so I went ahead and initiated that for the Board of Aldermen. And they hem-hawed around for a while, and then we did a survey. We said we spent $20,000 on a survey, and in that survey, the people, 72% of the people said yes, they would like to see a smoking ban. But the Board of Aldermen said, I think it was 7-3, said, we don't care what the people want. We're against smoking bans. And so they voted it down. So in a referendum, if you have most of the people that want it, and only seven out of 7 people in Raytown who are elected say, no, you don't get it, would be a good reason why you might want to have a referendum. I think one of the differences that you see between charters is some have all three, some only have referendum, where if the people want to initiate a law, they just go straight to the polls to do it, and not to the Board of Aldermen, because you're doing it twice then. you know. If the board voted it down, then you have to do it all over again to take it to the people. It's sometimes better to go directly to the people to vote on.
And I personally have not seen any that don't have all three. And I took all the regional charters and reviewed all them. And so if somebody's got a charter that they know of that doesn't have all three, I'd like to see it.
I have seen only one. It was a while, long back when I did this, but I would say probably the reason why you see all three is because of the recall portion of it. If you take up a petition, you put it to the board or the council, and they vote it down, they're oftentimes afraid they're going to get recalled if they vote it down. So it's kind of a ace in the hole, so to speak.
Yeah. Creates an
That makes
additional
sense.
check, yeah.
All right. We've read it once. We've made some minor corrections to it. Do you want to reread it based on the corrections? And
Okay.
then, oh, I'm sorry.
On here, in the recall, it doesn't exactly say who or why you can be recalled, and I know in the next one, I don't know, when I was reading, I thought I saw something about, about the name, title, elected official to be recalled, and general statement of reasons
Right.
for recall. So, since this one only deals with elected, shouldn't there be something in there
Or elected and appointed.
kind of cross-matching to that next one? As far as why you would be recalled?
Well, I think A, B, and C, but Ted just read, are just kind of like definitions or something like that. It's not trying to get into the full nuts and bolts as to why or something like that. And then section 10.2 actually gets into more of the reasoning, I guess you might say. In the first three, you're just letting the people know that they have these abilities, and then the rest further states what has to happen. So,
Well, I think for recall, at least in my mind, I mean, in order to be successful, it has to be a valid reason, especially if you have a high enough threshold, you know?
Well, and that's
I mean,
what I'm
that's the
saying, but
thing.
that's, you know,
I mean, are we gonna play that game where we're gonna outline what voters can recall for? I
no.
mean, that's the thing, and that's the thing, I'm afraid, I guess what I'm afraid that we're gonna get too confined and maybe, you know, kind of limit the will of the voter, is my only concern with that. And again, you know, I think honestly, if you set the and to me, the threshold's key about the recall. You know, you set it, you have a good threshold on there, it's gonna save the city time from, you know, and maybe elected officials or appointed officials from just a sore loser, if you will, or something like that, you know. And what it could also do, though, is that it has to be a valid reason. There has to be validity to that in order to get that support.
Who determines the valid reason?
The voters do. I mean, if they support the recall measure or not. I mean, just like when a governor gets recalled or something like that, you know, I mean, they're the ones that,
At the end of the day, it's their decision.
it's their decision at the end of the day, just like it's their decision if, you know, someone was elected or not. You know, they give a valid reason if, you know, I deserve to be in office or not.
I do think it's a possibility that if you're going to take a petition for recall, that you state in your petition why you want to recall.
Sure.
well, it says you have to
Yeah, it
do
does
it.
mention that in
Right.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what you're voting on, is
Yeah.
it true or not, or a good reason.
Right.
Do you need a motion?
Yes,
I'll motion for approval.
Okay.
I'll second.
So I'm going to let Lisa reread it based on the minor changes. And hopefully we can all keep up with her.
Did we make any changes other than adding the word city?
City, and then
I'm
at the
making
bottom,
it
the ballot
question.
wording shall be, and then the following.
Yeah, and the question on capital programs.
Yeah, we're gonna have the lawyer look at that, though, I think, maybe.
I
We
need
didn't
to
change
reread it?
anything, though, but, yeah.
Okay?
Do you want it reread?
Personally, I think that the capital programs is really meant to be programs that are already funded and in place, so that we cannot go back and try to de-budget something that's already been budgeted.
Okay. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably very close to the definition. A capital program has to do with the size and nature of the government expenditure.
So yeah, expenditure would be the word there, yeah.
Or it could be a lot of things. I mean, even if you are getting grant money, anything that is spent on capital improvement could be a capital program. And if indeed we got grant money for sidewalks, the voters couldn't take a petition and say, we want to spend it on streets.
Right.
But capital improvements are an example of the capital program. They're not a definition of the capital program.
I think we just highlight that word and see what the lawyer says.
All right, Article 10, Section 10.1, General Authority. A initiative. The qualified voters of the city shall have the power to propose ordinances to the Board of Aldermen, and if the Board of Aldermen fails to adopt an ordinance so proposed, without any change in substance, to adopt or reject if at a municipal election, provided that such powers shall not extend to the city budget or capital program in question, any ordinance related to the levy of taxes, zoning, or salaries of city employees, or any ordinance relating to any appropriation of money unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore. The term city employees in the section shall not include elected officials. A proposed initiative ordinance shall contain only one subject, which shall be clearly expressed in its title. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. B, referendum. The qualified voters of the city shall have the power to require reconsideration by the Board of Aldermen of any adopted ordinance, and if the Board of Aldermen fails to repeal an ordinance so reconsidered, to approve or reject it at a municipal election, provided that such power shall not extend to the city budget or capital program. Again, question. Any emergency ordinance, any zoning or land use issues, or any ordinance levying a special assessment or providing for the issuance of special tax bills, appropriation of money, levy of taxes, or salaries of city officers and employees. The term city employees in this section shall not include elected officials. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. C, recall. Any elected official, whether popularly elected or appointed, may be removed by qualified voters. No elected official shall be subject to recall within 6 months after induction into office, nor during the last 6 months of the official's term. The election shall be held at the next available regular or special election date as established by the Missouri election calendar in accordance with state law, for which timely notice may be given. If the elected official is retained in office upon any recall election, the official shall the official shall not be again subject to recall during the same term in office. The ballot wording shall be, shall such and such, name such and such, title of office such and such, be removed from office, yes or no? I do have one question. When we have in there timely notice may be given, we're not required to give timely notice then? Otherwise it would say shall be given. I'm just wondering, in accordance with state law for which timely notice may be given about an election, referendum, recall, whatever.
Your charter has the ability to place a shall and then you say so.
Yeah,
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
But also on, because it says in here on both of these about special elections. Where am I putting it there? So wouldn't that be an additional cost to the city?
Well, it's only saying that you can put it, if there was a special election going on, you could put it on the special election, in with the special election.
Special election.
Yeah, it's not saying that you're gonna have a special election just for that.
All righty.
Um, There's a line in here that does bother me a little bit. Under initiative, it says, a sentence that says, you see it?
No, it says not relating to the appropriation of money, it just doesn't.
This line that says, for any ordinance relating to any appropriation of money unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore. It seems like there's a qualification there that's not included in the referendum, not included in the recall. I think, that why should the public not be allowed to address issues of taxation?
Right, you're referring to the initiative section, but wouldn't that be covered in referendum if there's an already existing legislation?
What?
Wouldn't that be
No,
covered?
going forward.
Oh, so you're talking about like if you want to
Let's say-
ban some kind of,
No, his point is
if
that.
you, like,
his
I'm
point
just thinking
is that-
hypothetical.
The initiative here says that that you cannot have initiative for an ordinance that relates to an appropriation of money unless such ordinance, well, that
Provides-
that gives them the
Finding
ability.
of that.
Right.
You're taking away, you're
Well-
taking
You
away
can't do it
something, giving something
retroactive.
back.
I know,
Right.
should you especially have to give something back? I'll give you an example. When I was very young, I was on the city council. Don't laugh, it happened. Okay, anyway, there was we had a situation in Raytown where you had two water companies. One was private, one was public. The private water company was charging sales tax on their, on water that you bought. The public one did not, because they said they were a public entity, therefore they were not subject to those laws. And the city council, I brought an ordinance, and me and a couple others brought an ordinance, and we reversed that. We did away with the sales tax on the private one, since we could not make the public one do it. I suppose if you were to say that somebody wanted to bring this by initiative petition, according to what we're looking at here and considering, you couldn't do that unless you found a way to replace that money. And I don't think that's especially right, because sometimes taxes are done away with. We used to have a city sticker tax in this town. We don't anymore. That was done by the city council. I believe that the purpose of an initiative is to give the public the same power, as you stated earlier, to reach forward and to do what the legislators are not doing for them. And therefore, and I'm looking at this one because we do not see this exactly in Blue Springs, and I'm looking in the Lee Summit to see if they have it in here, if I can find a section.
Isn't that backwards to what it says though? If you eliminate a tax, that's not specific to an appropriation.
I agree.
The appropriation has to be how money's being spent. If you eliminate a tax,
Well, it's all appropriated.
It's all spendable.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all
and
spendable,
they,
but that doesn't make it an appropriation.
Not
If you
until-
want to eliminate a tax, that doesn't prohibit it.
No, that doesn't approve anything that's been appropriated. It's just short of funds.
Well, I'm reading it a little bit differently. I think what it says is that when the Board of Aldermen, first of all, we were given by the finance director a projection of what the budget will be for next year. And we sit down and all the departments plan their budget. I think it's saying that, so once you pass the budget, if the public doesn't like the way you budget your money, they turn around and have an initiative, they re-budget your money for you. And I'm thinking what it's saying is, no, you can't do that. You can pass more taxes if you want something new,
Yeah.
but you can't go back and change the budget that they just passed.
Why not?
Unless such ordinance provides for additional revenue.
Because therefore, you would not have a budget. Once you pass it by ordinance, and then you have to wait because it's coming up for vote, you're saying, therefore, we can't spend any of the money because there's gonna be an initiative to tell us how we're gonna spend it. It wouldn't even work.
Would be sticky.
You can't, in essence, if you can't spend the money you budget, you pass by ordinance, you don't have a budget, therefore, the government shuts down. Couldn't even pay for your salaries, because the budget's been shut down by the public because they just passed an initiative saying, can't spend your money. So
I think there
therefore,
would
you
be a
can't
good-
pay.
If they shut down every revenue stream.
If you
Yeah,
get, if you get
that's-
that many people saying no on an initiative, you'd think that
But
maybe there's a reason for
All the thing is
that.
that once the budget's passed, the public can't turn around and decide to rewrite the budget for you.
I'm just
If
saying
you want
theoretically, we can
something
write it
else,
like
then
that.
what they gotta do is they gotta raise taxes, what they
Right,
can do.
exactly.
And then they can get what they want.
What I'm saying is we could write it that way theoretically, I just wanted to hear the
What I'm
difference.
suggesting is that we allow the public to do it, because there are some inequities in the way that we collect tax in Raytown. For instance, your utilities, we all pay a franchise tax on our utilities. We also pay a sales tax on our utilities. The franchise tax, the sales tax, is taxed on the franchise tax. So you're being taxed on a tax. To me, that's terribly wrong. And I think that we should have changed it a long time ago and not had it that way. Sometimes I think municipalities do things that are contrary to what's best for them and for their own people. You only got to just go to Kansas City and see what the earnings tax has done to them over there. It's hamstrung their development. That's why everybody rushes over to Kansas to get away from the earnings tax. You know, or to the suburbs. So I just think that
Do you have a suggestion for,
Well, I don't think that we should have that. I mean, if somebody comes forward with something that says, we're not gonna allow you to tax, the public's not gonna vote for it. They're not gonna, in anybody's wildest dreams, but I think that we're hamstringing whoever does an initiative petition in that one thing. And of all the things that you can vote on, what is the most important on almost anything in life? It comes down to money. You know, I mean, it shouldn't, unless, well, you brought up a good example on the smoking ban, that's another, you know. We could turn into a dry city and not have any liquor sales, but, or so forth, but, I don't know, I just think that sentence, I'd like to leave that open for more discussion once we have an attorney to.
Well, let me just tell you I mean, the last half of that sentence where it says, or any ordinance relating to any appropriation of money unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues thereof, therefore, that's what you're questioning, right?
I'm in section
Okay.
A or B?
Yeah, we're in section A. That half of that sentence is not in the MML, but it seemed to be in all the other charters that I read,
But it's-
in some
It's
wordage.
contrary to the earlier part of the sentence where you cannot initiate initiative for the levy of taxes. So if you cannot have an initiative to create a tax, how does that exception work at all? As what he's, you know, this is, mind you, this is not helping Greg's argument. But the example he's looking at here simply says, among the things that you cannot have an initiative for is an ordinance related to the appropriation of money, end of phrase, and then levy of taxes. You cannot have an initiative to levy taxes, and you cannot have an initiative to appropriate money. And again, while this is not helping his argument, that extra part in that sentence there is a contradiction to the prohibition against levying taxes. If you cannot levy taxes to begin with, how are you going to provide a revenue stream? I guess you can mandate a bake sale, but
I'm okay with that.
Well, I mean, there's other ways of gaining money. I mean, you got grant programs and everything else that you can get funding for certain things.
so by initiative, you're going to mandate that somebody give you a grant? I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think you
Nobody's gonna
can.
give you grants.
Yeah, they're not just gonna give them to you, but I mean, if there's a way of getting a grant or something like that to help with it, but I mean, the first part of that sentence is straight out of the MML. I mean, up to the point where it says city employee.
Well,
I mean, so,
I'll repeat that we're arguing two different things.
Okay.
I think it goes to the point that it's created confusion by adding the last part of that phrase where it says, unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore. I don't know how an initiative is going to provide additional revenues, particularly when it can't be used to levy taxes.
Yeah, because up here it already says,
Right.
the ordinance related to the levy of taxes,
so,
so it's contradiction.
Yeah.
I don't see why we're putting restrictions on it. That's what I guess I'm saying.
If you would leave out the last,
Yeah.
the comma,
So you-
any
you're
ordinance,
saying we
all that
should
stuff, just
defer
leave it
to maybe
out.
What
and
the
let it-
ML has.
I would
'cause
agree with
they
that,
had
too.
that last section.
yeah.
Would you
that's
like to
missing.
motion an
Amended.
amendment?
Amend, a motion then
To strike.
to amend by striking the words.
Any ordinance related to the levying of taxes and
And just put a
salaries.
period
No,
after.
no, easy.
Oh, I thought that's what you meant, okay.
Unless such ordinances, unless such ordinances
Just
provide for
give
additional.
them
I was
a-
asking
Okay, I see
Greg.
what you're saying. Yeah, we want to protect this. Definitely, you want to protect that. You don't want that to be anarchy.
Well, I think that's the same argument that goes for the appropriation of money. I think the words that's causing the confusion is unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore.
Well, you have, this is going down to what you're saying here. It just, it strictly says you can't.
That's right. And that's what it says here.
I know, but that, look.
That's a different argument that you don't like.
Well, just because the MML said it didn't come down from the heavens and then down to the mountain and then down to
Well, the
MML
MML
and
didn't
then
say
down
it
to
is the
us.
thing. The MML didn't say it, he said.
Yeah, it didn't say anything after the city employees thing.
The
That came out of other.
The motion to amend that I'm proposing eliminates the words, "unless such ordinance provides for additional revenues therefore." I think that's contradictory when right up above there, it says you cannot have an initiative to levy taxes.
What about fees? Licenses.
What about it? It's not mentioned in there.
So
I'm
in
not
other
bringing
words,
it up.
okay. So in other words, well, by not stating, and you've eliminated them. Okay, such power shall not extend to the budget, we'll agree on that, I think, or to capital programs, because this is money that's basically decided that it's going, this is where it's already
part of the
committed,
budget.
okay? Maybe part of the contract or forth.
Or zoning.
Or zoning, why
Well,
don't we take part
relating
of
to
the levy of
levy.
taxes? Zoning or salaries of city employees.
That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me.
Any ordinance relating to zoning, take out the levy of taxes, put zoning or salary of city employees, period.
Because it's one of those things where if there is a major problem big enough to have that many signatures about a zoning issue, why couldn't they change it? I don't see a reason why
Well,
they shouldn't.
Do you have your email?
Because I think that
Yeah,
the reason I can
that's-
think of on
You
zoning
might have to look
is
at it.
because there are legal precedents.
Yeah, I just had it open to it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Those are
interrupt.
public hearings where this is that body's function. is
Sorry.
to do that. Now, if
Yeah,
you
but-
don't like it, then you're three
I
quarters.
apologize, but
But you could write it so it
What's
wasn't.
confusing is, in the state of Missouri, the only people who can raise taxes are the people, the voters themselves. So you wouldn't have an initiative because it's already going to come up to a vote of
So
the
it's
public.
completely superfluous, all the last part of the sentence is what you're saying.
So Greg, you're suggesting that to strike.
I would read, provided that such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program or any ordinances relating to zoning or salaries of city employees, and then just put a period there.
Okay, strike out the levy
Well,
of
but we have a
taxes.
motion on the floor.
Yeah.
But we do
That's
have a original motion, nobody
He's trying-
seconded Ted's
he's trying to
amendment.
amend it.
He's trying to
So-
make him, he's trying to make it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Of course, this would all be subject to review by,
Right, I think if anything, you would leave in the levy of taxes and highlight it, and, because I'm just reading right out of Belton and Raymore's are written exactly the way this one is written.
we follow the
But
same
we're not
bad
Belton and
template.
Raymore.
Well, but I mean, it could be.
Opinion, I guess.
Okay, Greg.
My
That's a
question
matter-
to you is, if you amend it, and then when you show it to the attorney, are you going to ask him, would that be appropriate to still have that in there?
Exactly,
Or
that's
you
why
just
we're,
strike it?
that's why we're highlighting it, yeah, so we
Okay.
can have that.
Because
So we're not
if,
really taking it out, we're going to ask the attorney if indeed it needs to be there, if not, then
well, we
you
have to
strike
listen
it.
to his amendment, then I don't know.
I don't know if we leave it up to him to make our decision.
Well, I
Yeah,
think it'd be
right
nice to,
there.
and I agree with you, but I think it'd be wise to seek counsel on that. I
Yeah,
don't see
I
anything wrong
his
with that.
recommendation about it.
Yeah, I'm just curious what he has to say.
If the citizens are the ones
Yeah.
that approve the taxes, why would you go and recall the taxes? But I don't know. It just seems
A lot of them
superfluous.
aren't approved by that way.
I didn't think they
Pretty-
were, but okay.
That's referendum, I'm not talking.
That's true.
All right, so how would that
Are they
read?
saying- Are they saying that if the people of the state of Missouri create a tax for the state of Missouri, then the people of Raytown can't rescind that tax to Raytown?
That's what it's saying right now.
It doesn't.
So it's the same thing. I don't know.
It doesn't?
It doesn't.
It sounds like it does to me. What, I don't understand why it wouldn't.
It says that the qualified voters will have the power to propose ordinances, and if the board fails to adopt an ordinance, that they can move to initiative except
Right.
city budget or capital programs, except levying taxes, except zoning, except salaries of city employees, and except any ordinance relating to the appropriation of money unless such ordinance provides for
Right.
revenue streams. So you cannot take those things to initiative. It's not giving you the power to take them to initiative, it's telling you you cannot take them.
It's blocking you, yeah, we've actually
Right.
got a thing named initiative that tells you as much no that you can't do as what you can do. Which is contrary to the idea of initiative.
No, I think it's just defining,
I
trying
presume
to
the
define it.
design is to keep from destroying the city council's ability to create a budget
exactly.
and to handle zoning and land use issues.
We've had situations where cities go rogue and
Well,
go
then
here
it's,
and away, and then, but here you have no way to address it.
We could be
Then you
Detroit
deal with
and then
it.
have no,
All
you deal
right.
with it, you deal with it through recall then, I would presume, because if
That'd be the consequence of
Because
such
every
action.
time, the consequence of changing too much of this is that anytime you create a budget, you are going to have petitions to change the appropriations in the budget because somebody didn't get what they wanted.
that many signatures? Really?
You put your-
Yeah, really.
I don't know if you would.
Who's
By
gonna
your
walk to
own
do that?
argument.
Who's gonna walk to do that?
You would be surprised.
Okay, so are we doing an amendment or not?
Well, I think we ought to,
If you amend it, you have to.
yeah, the referendum has the same situation.
So, don't know what to do.
Provided that such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program, we agree that's fine. Any emergency ordinance, I don't understand that part, because I've seen emergency ordinances to rename streets. You know, well, I have.
Well, I think we fixed that in the definition of an
Yeah.
emergency
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah.
I don't think-
Any zoning power shall not, or any zoning or land use issues, agreed on that, or any ordinance levying a special assessment or providing for the issuance of special tax bills. I can understand special assessment, special tax bills. I don't understand the definition of that exactly. Appropriation of money, levy of taxes, there it is again. And, I mean, it's just, once again, you have a situation where you say, okay, we're gonna give you this power with initiative referendum now. Now, here's this long list of things you will not do.
Yeah, you cannot do it.
Yeah.
So you want to give people the power to have initiative or referendum to levy taxes,
I think-
not to levy special assessments being the fees you discussed,
Mhm. I just brought
or
these.
providing the issuance for special tax bills. The irrationality of this is just,
I don't know, but the discussion I gave earlier on the sales tax being taxed upon a tax. Suppose there was, generally speaking, you know, that people said, you know, we don't think we should have to pay a tax on top of a tax, we think it's wrong. You're really not talking that much money. I've often wondered why the city never just didn't voluntarily do away with it. But suppose the public went forward and said, we don't think you should tax us on a tax, and that's what you're doing, so we're going to make it so you cannot tax us on a tax. According to this, they can't do that, the way it's written.
That happens a lot, Greg. The phone bills, AT&T, federal end user fees, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. They just keep, it's a tax on a tax.
Yeah.
I agree with everything Greg says. I'd like to see it changed where, not to the point of anarchy where the main system
his words,
stays.
not mine.
But I can see where if someone has an issue with, hey, you know, why are we paying bird watching tax? You know, because it's really silly sometimes.
So on A, let's start with A. Is somebody gonna throw out an amendment and get it seconded?
Well, I'll throw it out there then.
Okay.
Going to the fourth sentence where it says, such power shall not extend to the budget or capital program or any ordinance relating to, strike what I don't say. Okay?
Gotcha.
Zoning or salaries of city employees. Did you see what I skipped?
Yep,
Okay. Period.
okay. And then that cuts out what he wanted to cut out.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
On B,
On B,
So what you're saying is you want the general public to have the ability to,
they're the ones paying the bill.
Yeah, to argue against a tax or anything.
levying of taxes.
we don't want any tea dumped.
So,
What would we dump it into?
I mean, if Jackson County imposes a tax, or, I
I
mean,
would, you know what, I'm tired of paying Jackson County all the money for them to stop the new roads at the beginning of Raytown here.
You can't legislate that in city.
okay,
Greg, B,
We do that on cars all the time. I mean, you have federal taxes that go on cars, and you end up paying a tax on top of that when you pay your sales tax, so you don't have a choice.
strike levy of taxes.
And that's usually why you.
Should we strike it or just highlight it for the attorney?
Well, we'll strike it, but we can put a footnote there if you want to,
Right.
because I'm sure that this will be revisited.
Can you repeat what you said? I'm sorry.
Well, in B, I think all you want to do is strike levy of taxes.
I mean, apparently, it looks like all, of course, through the federal and state and cities, they
Why can't you
they think
keep
they
track
can
of
tax
all
the
this?
way to prosperity.
I don't think it's gonna make a difference, because I think in the end, it'll be decided for you. Either by the state or by the federal government.
Out there.
Okay. And is there anything in C, Greg?
I
No?
don't know, we're
Okay.
discussing another changes.
I will second your amendment.
Let's just do initiative first. And I want to stress that this, my point here is not to go out and to start a petition once this passes. My point here is that we should not hamstring people on what they can do with their initiative petitions.
I disagree. I mean, I think you gotta have some control over
We
it.
do have control.
Well, I'd like to see here,
What control
read
are you losing?
again, just what you're proposing, because I get the levy of tax argument, but I think you gotta be very cautious when you start going in, I mean, you know, there's obviously budget concerns and things like that in terms of the mundane business of City Hall that needs to be consistent, and that's what concerns me on that end. So I'd be happy I'd feel better if we could reread this, but honestly, I would feel much better if this was just highlighted and we can seek counsel of a lawyer so we can ask them these questions,
Okay.
because some of us are pretending we have JDs here and we don't.
That's true.
You know, so I would prefer if maybe, and I do get the argument the levy of taxes completely, I really do with you, I sympathize on that. Being said, though, I do want to see that highlighted, and I'd like to consult attorney.
Rather than see the issue prematurely stomped, which I get the sense
Yeah.
that probably will happen, I would rather see it carried over in that case.
Would you be necessarily opposed if we maybe, voted on this, but then had that section looked at, and then we can
Right,
re-vote
we
on
can vote
that?
on the general premise of initiative referendum recall, which I think there's probably a majority for anyway.
You know, it's an option that we leave 10-1 the way it is with this discussion
Mhm.
and just move on
Yeah.
without voting on 10-1 at all.
Amen.
Because
It could change.
it can be rewritten by 3 or 4 of us here and presented in a finished rewritten form so everybody can look at it and understand what it is that they're trying to get rid of. Take out the taxes, or take out the half sentence, or whatever, and we can come back to it.
Are you
This is
suggesting-
just like last week, we don't have to do this
Are you suggesting we
in front to back.
not hear the last amendment and second then?
You've already seconded it.
I know.
I know, because you got 2 motions. You've
I
got the
know.
amendment and then
I'm
you've
just
got the
asking you
original.
if that was,
No, if you want to leave it alone and move on, we vote both down.
We don't
Well, that's what I'm
have to
saying.
vote them down, we can just make a motion to consider it at a later time.
I think that takes precedent, yeah.
Yeah.
If we move
So
to
there's a motion to table.
postpone, we
That's
can't
true.
table, we
Yeah.
cannot table, we can postpone, but we have to postpone it to a
You
specific.
can table.
The sky is not falling, there's no immediate thing that we can, that's postponing.
Right.
If you table, that means there is something significant, like the sky is falling in this room and we have to get out of the building, we can't do this right now.
Let's just move on.
Postponing,
And-
yeah.
and
So if somebody
my
wants to.
guess is this is something an attorney put in after someone else wrote it.
Mhm.
And there's a
Probably
logic
somebody-
behind
probably
it that
somebody
we can't figure
worked for
out.
us.
That's the point, I want to hear that logic, yeah.
Okay, so when should we postpone it to? We have to.
Whenever we have the attorney,
We have to have a date to postpone it to.
so
We
TBA.
have one here.
Okay, so if you want to make the motion to postpone until we get an attorney to look at it,
I move we postpone this.
Okay.
Second.
until we get.
Let's
an
highlight those sentences too in our notes, so
Got
that
'em.
way.
It's already
we know what
done.
to bring up. Great, thanks.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded to postpone.
Who seconded?
Michael.
Okay.
Yeah, we could talk about the signatures.
All right. Mary Jane Van
Postpone
Busker.
what?
10.1.
10.1, section 10.1.
10.1.
All the things. Mary
It's the
Jane
whole
Van
thing or
Busker.
just A?
All the whole thing, 'cause we had it in B
All
too.
two.
Yeah,
Because some of the wording is
These are
consistent there.
signatures.
Mary Jane and
Is this
Busker.
just postponed or postpone until we get a lawyer?
Yes, postpone till we get a, because we have to have a specific time to postpone.
Are you
so.
postponing C also?
He's
I
a,
don't know if it just
yes,
I thought you were
we're
doing
doing
the
all
entire
one as far as I
section.
know.
Yeah,
That's my
we're-
understanding.
City of Public Restrooms.
Yes.
All right.
Mary Jane Van Busker.
Yes.
No, okay, Steve Gunther,
Yes.
Janet Emerson, Charlotte Milson,
Yes.
Mark Moore,
Yes.
Jim Asia,
Yes.
Greg Walters,
Yes.
Ted Bowman,
Yes.
Jason Green,
Yes.
Sandra Hartwell,
Yes.
Michael McDonough,
Yes.
Lisa Emerson abstain.
What was your vote?
Abstain.
So what's that count?
10 to, 10.
10, 1, and 2? No, it can't be. 9, 1, and 2.
Yes, that's the abstentions, 10 to 0. They passed 10 to 0.
All right, that motion passes 10 to 0. All right, we'll move on to section 10.2.
10.2, commencement of proceedings, petitioners committee, notarized affidavit. Any 5 qualified voters may commence initiative, referendum, or recall proceedings by filing with the city clerk a notarized affidavit stating that they will constitute the petitioners committee and be responsible for circulating the petition and filing it in proper form, stating their names and street addresses, and specifying the address to which all notices to the committee are to be sent, consenting that notice by the United States certified mail, return receipt requested to such address shall constitute a valid notice to the committee, and setting out in full the proposed initiative ordinance, or citing the ordinance sought to be reconsidered, or specifying the name and title of office of the elected official to be recalled, and a general statement of the reason or reasons for recall. Not more than 3 business days after the notarized affidavit of the petitioners committee is filed, the city clerk shall issue the appropriate petition blanks to the petitioners committee.
Should we include the first sentence, and maybe I'm already answering my own question, but it says any 5 qualified voters, should we include of the city, or is of the city to be assumed to be a qualified
That
voter?
would be a good point. I agree we should.
I would assume
Trying to put the city of Raytown.
Well, I know, but
It's assuming.
well, yeah, and I just, my fear would be,
It's like doing what.
and
the
it may be
budget, right?
covered in the word qualified voter, but again,
Well-
I just want to make sure that,
People are qualified voters in Kansas City,
Right.
Missouri, too.
And
I
that,
know,
well, that was
but-
the thing I suggested for the last thing, we should put in
Yeah.
the city, just to make sure that we're really.
so I
talking
mean,
about the
I
city.
just want to make sure it's in
I
there
would
that,
suggest that too,
don't want to leave any
if
little
anybody's not
loopholes.
okay with that. Nice catch.
Okay, just to let everybody know, everything that I looked at, they all had 5 qualified voters at the beginning, and then where it says 3 business days, only Raymore had 5, everybody else that I looked at had 3, so it seemed to be pretty consistent with the 3 there.
Well, that's not the end of this. What did you say about the number 5?
Well, where it says any 5, that was what every charter and the MML suggested. So that number was consistent. And then where it said not more than 3 business days down at the bottom, out of all the charters and the MML that I looked at, only Raymore had 5. All the other ones had 3. So 3 seemed to be the consistent number. So we can make it whatever we want.
I like the idea of 5. I don't think 3's an incapable number of getting petition blanks together to be distributed.
Say that again.
I said, I think 5 is fine for the number of the qualified voters.
Right.
And that, you know, the 3 business days after the notarized affidavit is plenty of time for the clerk to be able to get the appropriate petition blanks
Right.
distributed to the committee.
Motion to accept as written with the word city and qualified.
Second.
All right. Charlotte Milson,
Yes.
Mark Moore,
Yes.
Jim Asia.
Yes.
Lisa Emerson, yes. Ted Bowman,
Yes.
Janet Emerson.
Yes.
Sandra Hartwell,
Yes.
Mary Jane Van Busker,
No.
Greg Walters,
Yes.
Michael McDonough,
Yes.
Steve Gunther,
Yes.
and Jason Scott.
10.3 petitions. A, number of signatures. 1, initiative. An initiative petition shall be signed by qualified voters of the city, equal in number to at least 10% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election. 2, a referendum. A referendum petition shall be signed by qualified voters of the city, equal in number to at least 10% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election. 3, recall. A recall petition shall be signed by qualified voters for that office in number equal to at least 30% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election. I believe I'll call it.
All right. Just to give you some information on initiative where it says 10%, the MML suggestion is 15. Lee Summit is 7, but they qualify it differently. Raymore is 10, Belton's 10, Blue Springs is 8. Lee Summit, I'm not sure if, I think it was still on the registered voters. You have the Lee Summit one still, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Right. Lee Summit only had their recall ones different in the way they did it, so.
I wonder
It's all
about the
good,
part
though.
where it says
Guess what,
that voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election. That's quite a qualifier to have to go back and prove. So,
Wait a minute.
Wait, I mean,
Why?
We didn't do that
Yeah.
when we were getting petitions to get on this. We had a
yeah,
number that we had.
that was the number.
I understand that, but registered voters to vote at the last regular municipal election. In other words, if you weren't registered to vote at the last regular municipal election, you couldn't sign the petition.
Right.
Correct.
That's right. That's where it
Well,
is.
Well,
now, too, they're not saying people that voted.
No, they're not.
Registered
yeah,
voters.
Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
because it's the 10% of that total number that voted.
You're right, I misread.
Yeah.
Right, there's 10%
Okay.
of everything.
Okay,
There's the
yeah,
number
we-
of registered voters.
Okay,
voting
and to
laws.
give you an idea, there are 16,863 registered voters,
How many?
16,867 in the city of city of Raytown. If you look at 10%, that's, you'd have to gain 1,687 names on your petition. That's a pretty high number. I mean, you'd have to be worthwhile doing.
If you did instead by the number of people who voted in the last election or any
And that
given
did-
general
more-
election, that would be way too
It'd
low.
be
So I'm thinking that,
1,687 registered voter names.
in my opinion, I think that getting 10% of the registered voters might be a little high, and getting 10% of the registered voters who actually voted is way too low. So maybe we could figure out a percentage somewhere in there.
So how much was the last one of voters?
April
voted?
2014 was almost 2,000 people, 1989. And August of 2014 was 3,828 people voted. And so 10% of that is only like 400 people. It's nothing. That
Well,
would
that's-
be way too easy to
Yeah,
get.
but you only want to look at municipal election numbers.
Right, I'm just giving figures for, which, it would be the August one, or would it be the April?
It would be the April,
April? Okay,
Yeah.
that would be way low then.
yeah.
At any rate, the 10% at 1,600 people is a lot of signatures. So if we could find
5 would be 800.
5% of 16,
Yeah, it would be 843,
yeah.
So what about?
44, yeah.
8,000,
15%.
well,
So 800,
That would be fine.
43.
right.
It'd be 843.
For both of them. initiative.
Yes, 844 people would be 5%.
5% be 844.
Mhm.
What did it take for,
Lee Summit put 7% in theirs.
what was 7% do?
7%? 1,180.
Something about only 4 digits makes it seem almost insurmountable.
Yes, it does.
Well, but you don't want it happening a lot. I
You
mean,
don't want to.
You want it to be
But
a
if
valid
you can-
reason.
if you
Yeah.
consider-
Make a farce
If you
of it.
consider that figure at
then-
7% would be almost only a few hundred shy of how many people actually voted in the election. that's that's pretty close. If only 2,000 people vote in the April election and you only need 1,100 or 1,200,
Or to more like,
that's only a few hundred difference.
Right.
But two different processes too, though.
Yeah, you are.
Not to
Oh, I understand that. I'm just saying that getting more people out for that is,
so the question,
A
real
tall
quick,
order.
can I ask a question here? We can try playing with the numbers or not, or it could be, I mean, you want to keep it the last regular municipal election. Is that what we're always going to base these numbers off of?
if they write it
Because it
down.
doesn't always have to be. It could be, the last.
I think
Election.
that's the easiest.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, and the reason I asked that is because we can manipulate the percentages all we want. I just want to make sure what we're going off of, because we're giving August numbers and we're also giving,
Just for
April
April,
numbers.
it's just shy of
Okay.
Well, how's
2,000.
it done at the state? I mean, when you take initiative or referendum at the state, how did they do it?
probably off the statewide elections, the last federal ones, I imagine.
I'm
The
thinking,
1%.
how do they do it for the charter process was done off the last municipal election?
No, but it was done off the number of people that voted.
That's
not the
right.
number of
Right.
voters.
But perhaps that's a guideline we should follow, and if you want, then you could up to 10, 15.
Well, I mean, if you did it that way, and you even did 30%, you'd only be looking at around 600 signatures.
Here's the deal, though. I think that you play a dangerous game when you talk about voting turnout, because sometimes voting turnout at municipal level is higher when the mayor's running, as opposed to the non-mayor cycle, it may be lower. Like, for instance, this last April election, we had the school board bond issue. So it happened to be a higher, obviously, turnout, So at least my suggestion would be to base it off of registered voters. It's more consistent that way. There's a threshold that's consistent regardless of the time.
It's a static number. It
Yeah.
doesn't have anything
As
to do with
opposed-
current.
As opposed to, let's say there was a really bad ice storm one,
Yeah,
April
I see.
election, and no one came out, and so now all of a sudden, I get 200 signatures, and I'm gonna get.
Or just
You
choose
know?
a single number, or just choose a number that you like.
Yeah, but the problem is the population swings. I think if you had it just based on, and I see your point, though, it has some consistency, but, I think if you base it off registered voters, that percentage off of them, I think you get a consistent, clear picture.
I like 7%.
Well, I'm curious what the numbers are for, okay, so registered voters in Raytown, 1680, okay, so 7% would be 1,100.
And 80, yes.
That's a lot.
But I mean, that's a lot, but I mean, you go to like a city like Lee Summit, and how many, there's 80,000 or so or more people, and how many registered voters, and they're saying 7%. So, I mean, in order for them to get a initiative started, they're looking at 3,000 or 4,000 signatures.
But they have a lot more people to
I think I'm more
collect.
people to collect.
But, I mean,
That makes a lot
but
of
the effort, I mean, it's still the amount of
And it's-
effort that has to be
Wouldn't it be
done.
just one issue that you're talking
Yeah,
about?
you're only- you know,
So you
talking
have
about-
50 people going out to get
In Lee
1,100
Summit.
things. It's
Good
not
luck
like
here.
us that had to go
Right.
get
Right.
50 names or
Right.
something like that. So that's not insurmountable when you take 1,100 and you divide it by so many people and going out to get, everybody's got to get 100 or something. I don't know.
Right.
What does 6 do?
$1,012.
What about 8?
Would you say anything?
Yeah, I'm inclined to go up a little bit.
I like
And
7.
Blue Springs they had 8 as far as their percentage.
So what's that?
I'm working on 1,350.
But honestly, I mean, if it's a great issue, and again, this is the filter. This is the filter to make sure it's not some bogus argument. I'm fine with 10, to be frank with you. I think 1,600 signatures,
Almost 17.
almost 1,700, yeah, 1,687. I mean, sorry, that's just me. I mean, I really do think that if it's an issue that's worthwhile, that's how you vet it. And you look, I said earlier, I trust a majority of the Raytown voting public, because the ones we have to vote in April tend to be the ones that are more, in touch with things. I'm not going to speak about the November elections. Obviously, you get all sorts of individuals that come out for those, but the point is, the April municipal elections, you usually have voters who are more in tune with what's going on in municipal affairs, and I think if you if you base it off registered voters, I do think that you have a high threshold, nothing ridiculously too high, but something that says, look, if you can't get an extra 400 signatures from 1,200 to 1,700 or 1,600, whatever, then maybe what you're pushing, it doesn't carry any weight.
You're pushing the number up to almost how many people will actually vote on the
Right,
issue.
that's how many people would have voted.
I'm telling you, this, you're getting a signature though.
Yeah,
It's a
you're
lot
just
easier to
getting
get a
a
signature,
signature,
and this is
yeah.
based off, this is registered
Right.
voters. So, I mean, look, it's not like I'm talking about actual people that I need to get the signature
No,
if
I
they're
mean,
voting or
you have-
not.
Right.
If you have that initiative on the ballot, you may only have 1,600 people vote, which means you have to have 100% of the people signing the petition.
Well,
No,
or,
no,
no,
no.
No,
not
not the
necessarily.
people
No,
that
no.
actually voted
No, I
have
mean,
to
no,
sign
in
it.
reality, that's what it's doing.
No,
It's
you can
saying-
stand out in front of the grocery store and say, are you
If you're a registered voter,
Okay,
yeah.
Here's my issue, and you can say whatever you want.
Doesn't mean it have to come
And then they can
out.
sign their name to it, they can get it certified by the Board of Elections. and
I'm
you have a
just,
certified
my big
voter.
concern, again, this is the vetting process. And I'm afraid that, and not that, again, I don't trust individuals to at least try to work towards
Can we
something
write that on the
to a
ballot?
solution, but
We can.
I think that if you make something too low, you run the risk of driving up election costs drastically. And that's something I'm very afraid of doing.
Well, not
So-
only that, you don't, if somebody is just out there somewhere, and they're mad at the city for whatever reason,
A win.
yeah. And if you make it high enough, and if they really, really want it, they'll get out and work to get what
Yeah.
they need.
Yeah.
You'll be
If they're
moving.
just plain lazy, we don't have to worry
Well, and if they're
about it.
lazy, obviously
Yeah.
they didn't care much about the
They're not
issue in
gonna
the
get
first place.
844
They're
signatures.
just
So,
voicing their-
I just don't think 1,600 signatures is hard to get. I don't think it's that hard to
I think
get.
about
I can
people
get
that
it.
run for office, takes, I think, 50 signatures to get on the ballot in Raytown, yet nobody ever goes out and gets the 50 signatures because they realize after 20, they've gone through their A-list, and they go, oh my goodness, this is harder than I thought.
You can speak for yourself on that end,
Yeah.
Dan.
Well, no, I don't have a problem with that.
I know, I'm
All right,
joking.
let's,
But the thing is, I think you're putting it way too high to where you'll never see this used. You might
Okay.
as well not even have it in
Well,
there.
I disagree, but,
Jason.
I agree with Jason. You
okay,
disagree or-
okay, let's,
I agree with you.
we have all the numbers, okay? And I think we're all in agreement that,
Feels nice to be.
I mean, unless somebody says something differently, we go with qualified registered voters at the last municipal election,
So we need
correct?
to put in registered.
Excuse me,
Does it matter?
are we voting on all three of these?
No, we're just
I think
doing,
separate amounts.
separate, yeah.
Do I need to put in registered? It doesn't make any difference.
It says 10% of the total number of qualified voters registered. I'm sorry, that's
I
right.
don't see any registered anywhere. Oh, you mean at the bottom, I see.
No,
I thought you meant,
under one.
I know, I thought you meant the top line, signed by qualified voters of the city, of the total
Right.
qualified
Right.
voters.
All right, 10%
Okay.
is 1,687, 8% is 1,350, 7 is 1,180. I can't see going below that. But right now, can I just have a show of hands at who would put 10% in? All right, that's a consensus. Let's put the 10 in, and we'll vote on it then from there.
Are we skipping the recall and just getting the two out of the way? Is that what we're doing?
No, we're gonna do initiative, I mean, I'd say we just do them each separately, or unless you wanna,
Well, we do them all at the same time.
well, referendum is basically the same thing.
Right.
We might as
Yeah,
well just
so-
do A at the same
oh,
time,
yeah.
all of A.
Yeah, yeah.
So somebody motioning to do A?
Well, we have to do recall, the number on recall though.
But we're
All of A.
gonna vote by these
Isn't that A?
separately,
I
correct?
thought you just divided them up
Yeah.
and set voting on them separately.
I thought we were doing that as well.
Accept that.
Yeah, we're voting A and B.
Second.
Okay,
I agree.
okay.
Okay, so we'll vote on A and
We
B.
have a motion.
Her motion was, would you like to
Just
restate?
do A and B.
A and B. That's a lot of stuff. I don't think that's what you mean.
No,
A one
exactly,
and
that's
two
what I'm
on
saying.
1 and 2.
A.
A,
1 and 2, you're
One
talking
and
1 and 2.
Ted, is that what you're
That's
agreeing
what
to
I'm
say?
getting
One
at.
and two.
1 and 2.
1 and 2, there you
Yeah,
go.
1 and 2.
We know what he meant.
Okay, 10%.
10.3, A, 1 and 2. One moment, please.
Ted and Sandy.
And Ted seconded, and okay. 10%. Sandra Hartwell,
Yes.
Janet Emerson.
Yes.
Mary Jane Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Michael McDonough.
Yes.
Greg Walters.
Pass.
Mark Moore.
Yes.
Lisa Emerson, pass. Jason Green.
Yes.
Steve Gunther.
Yes.
Charlotte Melson.
Yes.
Jim Asia.
Yes.
Ted Bowman.
Yes.
Greg Walters.
Yes.
Oh, why not? Sure.
All right. That's a yes.
Woo!
Lord
If you
knows
want me
she's
to-
tracking her votes already there.
Do you want me to send out the figures to everybody so you can look at them? Or do you care?
No. Been voted on.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
figures are you talking about?
What I just did the calculations on for the
Oh.
registered voters and things. Well, 2 people care, so I'm sending it out.
Well, I think the number of registered voters needs to be in there.
What?
How many signatures will it take?
No, I'm just sending out for
That's
everybody's
gonna change.
knowledge, just to know just
Well-
what we looked at tonight.
Okay, I would ask that you enter in the minutes that the discussion included the fact that there were 16,000, however many
Right.
registered.
Okay, I'll do that.
But that's gonna change.
Right.
Right,
It's
but-
in the- it's in our minutes.
In the minutes, not in the charter, yeah.
In the AFB. or-
That's what my
I
concern was,
just
have
wanted
something
that number
consistent.
reported.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just shows that to the voters out there that we looked at the issue in great detail. Okay? It wasn't arbitrary numbers. Okay, on the recall, item 3, the MML does not include recall in their document, so Raymore had 30%, Belton 30%, Blue Springs only had 12% of the total number of qualified voters registered. Lee Summit actually words it different. They look at 30% of the votes cast for the office in the election at which that office was elected.
That's
So-
reasonable, probably.
Well, yeah, but again, you run into the problem of, with that, you do run into the problem of the voter turnout that particular election. That's the only concern I have with that. But I have another concern,
Especially when you're talking about an individual.
yeah,
Right.
about individual. The second
Right.
concern I have though,
But
too-
I'm just putting it out there because there is at least one charter I know of that does take it differently, so.
I think it makes sense on that, in recalls. Because if you're talking about an aldermanic seat, for instance, you're talking about only a fifth of the city. And it's going to be peculiar.
and we haven't distinguished that too. And number
Yeah.
3, I noticed there's nothing in there about, it says 30% of the registered qualified voters. Well, if we're talking about an alderman, it should be people in his or her ward. So we need to distinguish ward there. In addition, if we're talking about a citywide elected official, then you gotta make a distinction for that. And even if there's an appointed individual, if the recall passes, we did mention in here that it's an appointed as well, could be recalled, then I think, in my opinion, you gotta make that citywide as well, because that's a citywide position if it's whatever you're appointed to. So, those distinctions, I think, need to be put in section 3 there.
Appointed position citywide, I mean,
Well, I was referring to the recall process, that you need to have that number based off, for an alderman, for instance, based off his or her ward, as opposed to just a
Right.
blanket statement. And then for the citywide elections, like, whether it be
City collector,
police,
mayor, whatever.
mayor,
That needs
and
to be city.
citywide. Now, I also would include that if it's an appointed position, it should be based off citywide numbers as well.
Not if
Beca-
they're
But
appointed
appointed,
to a ward to replace an alderman, it should.
right.
Okay, well, yeah, with the exception of
Yeah.
that. Yeah, with the
Well, that's what
exception
I'm
of
saying,
that.
because that's usually what
Well,
appointed are.
yeah, well, I'm referring to
And
other
it-
appointed
Well, but
positions, too.
appointed, those people aren't elected first.
Yeah, I know, but
So they wouldn't have any constituent
well,
base.
and I understand that, but I guess in the wording I'm looking at here, from the recall section here, it says, any elected official, so I take that back, because it says any elected official, I'm thinking of just appointed
Because even
on
appointed
there.
should, I mean.
So we
appointed
can
do.
scratch that appointed
Because
part.
if somebody's appointed.
I was just saying, if somebody was like, well, we don't like this
Well, it does say
person
something
appointed
in
for
here. It says whether
park board or whatever, I don't know.
Popular.
Elected or appointed.
To an elected office.
I could see it.
And that's what it said, it said to elected office, and that's why
So
I
your
come back track on that a
recall
little
would
bit.
only be on an elected office.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, just for the elected
Okay.
position.
And I was just trying to be consistent with what we previously had, and I forgot to read the section that said any elected official right at the front, so. Anyway.
Because if he was filling the office that was previously.
Yeah, it'd be either appointed, city appointed,
Right.
like in terms of alderman or whatever. But we do need to make the distinction between ward and citywide and then determine whatever that number might be.
But, so you're wanting to leave it up to the individual ward and not the?
Well, for the Board of Aldermen, yeah, I mean, why should people in Ward 5 determine my fate in Ward 2?
Well, for one reason is because whatever reason somebody is upset with that alderman, whatever he does or she does.
It's a citywide
affects the
deal.
city.
And I agree.
Citywide.
But like, for instance, Ward 2 elected Jim and I. You know, Ward 2 is the ones elected. Ward 2 should have the sole power to get rid of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think otherwise, you know, you can have
Right.
all sorts of issues. You know,
People could be coming up with
here's the idea.
petitions
We
left
represent
and
the
right.
city as a whole, but we also represent Ward 2. I mean, we obviously have more of a focus on that particular ward.
If whatever you've done affects the city in a negative way,
It's a city thing.
Well,
It's a city
and
issue.
I agree with you on that end, but, and I will say this, and I do understand what you're saying on that. But if, let's say I did something that affected the city in a negative way, wouldn't the people in my ward want to recall me anyway on that? You see what I'm getting at? I don't know.
Maybe not. Well,
Otherwise, people from different parts of the city would be
I'm just worried about
recalling everybody.
subversion.
Unless-
Ward 5 or Ward 4 or Ward 3 or 1
Yeah.
could subvert the democratic will of Ward
Exactly.
2.
But
If I
unless
was,
you
you
did,
see what I'm saying? I
unless
guess.
you did
I
something,
understand
Yeah.
what you're saying.
I
I get
understand
it.
unless
what
you
get
did
saying.
something really great for Ward 2 that affected all the other wards, but it was only for Ward 2, Ward 2 wouldn't recall you. Everybody else might be
Yeah.
really ticked
That
off
Jim
at
Major,
you.
he just focuses on Ward 2 roads, not my
But,
roads.
see what I mean,
It's like-
though? I mean,
Yeah.
if you do something that's so.
I don't think you can separate it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I think you should.
So I agree with Jason, because you run in your ward, you knock on the doors in your ward, you talk to those people in your ward, they know you best. So if.
Not after you're elected, not after you're
The
elected.
people in wards
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, and 5
Yeah,
don't
they
like
do.
them, they could just take a petition to get rid of them.
I mean,
I don't even know if it's legal to do it the other way.
Well, I think you create an
can't-
issue, like,
yeah.
again, my attitude is this, is that the people in Ward 2 elected me. I'm not a citywide position. I was just elected by Ward 2. Why should the people in Ward 3 have I mean, you could not get one signature from one person in my ward with the way this is written and get me out of there. I mean, I have a problem with that.
Get you out of there.
Well, I mean, if it goes
Well, I
through.
guess if the whole
Because it's
city-
the whole city voting on it, yeah, through the way this is written.
If you elect them,
I
if you're
think
not
you just-
electing them, how can you recall them?
You
It's
subvert
very
the democratic
not okay.
will, I think,
Yeah,
of the
because
people in
you
those
do
wards.
have it, you're right.
So you really don't
elected
represent
by
your ward.
those-
Yeah, you don't.
But you're
So if that's the
elected,
case,
you don't
we
represent
should all be
your
at
ward at
large.
all.
We should all be at large then.
Sure, or
If you do
we
it this
could
way.
all be at large.
And generally speaking, politically speaking, when you have somebody, for instance, Jason, if he were to run citywide and I were to run citywide in another type of race, and I would say I represent Ward 1, he represents Ward 2, he's going to draw stronger in Ward 2 than he will in Ward 1. I will draw stronger in Ward 1 because that's my base. That's where I know most of the people. So it does come down to a very parochial type of thing where you are talking about the people that you represent. That's your job.
Well, I mean, here's the
They're the
deal.
only
Put it
ones
this
that
way.
vote.
Okay, we have a recall in the state of Missouri for the governor. Should the people in Kansas have the power to recall the governor of Missouri?
That's extreme.
Well, I know, but it's similar though. I mean, the
No,
point
because
is,
we don't even vote, we can't vote there.
Yeah.
well, I know, that's the
point.
I'm making.
That's the point.
That's the point.
That is specifically the point.
Well,
Should be-
yeah, we can't recall
Why are we having this
the
discussion?
state representatives from other districts.
Exactly. That's a better example. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jim.
we can't do that.
Yeah, we can't. I can't recall. Will Kraus because
Yeah, because he leaves something.
he's not here anymore.
Well, does anybody have an example of a charter that's written that way? Because I haven't seen one yet.
Well,
But we
it's hard
can
to
write
do.
our own.
Well, I understand,
Okay.
but I mean, we had to go from something.
Well, yeah, we're cutting new ground.
Yeah, we can write our own, we don't have to go.
But yeah, there are examples because of charters that have people at large. There are, I mean, there are differences in charters.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because if you had a charter that one is in large, then obviously that wording's not necessary.
And they're different sized cities, they're not the same.
Yeah.
We're gonna make ours better.
Is Lee Summit at large?
No,
No, they're fine.
their
Independent.
charter says.
Jason, do you need to
By
change wording in this, or are you suggesting?
Well, I'm suggesting that,
Because let me know.
okay, I guess here's
Well,
what,
you don't want that.
if we're done discussing it, I can make a suggestion maybe.
Yes, please.
Okay, we haven't talked about the number yet, so let's just ignore that for a second. But it would be qualified voters, so pretty much what you want to do is you want to add an additional sentence like, for a alderman, and you may want to reword this after I write it. For an alderman, something to the effect about qualified voters from their particular ward.
From an automatic ward. from the-
Recall can only be
Yeah.
initiated
Or
from the ward.
continue what you were saying, you may have something,
Jason, recall may only be initiated from the ward.
and decided. Recall may only be initiated and
And decided.
decided from voters, qualified voters within the particular ward that alderman represents, the alderman in question represents, or something to that effect.
Well, I think you're gonna have to separate out citywide
Well, then, yeah,
and
well,
then
yeah.
separate, I mean,
And that's
For
fine.
aldermen, as you
Yeah,
just
so if
said.
you put alderman, so that's essentially that.
Or Jason, even 30% of the total qualified voters is fair.
Right.
That's a pretty high number.
For that ward, yeah.
How much?
No, not that ward, of the city. If the city's gonna recall them, it should be the
Oh,
Well, but
30% of the total qualified voters
not?
of that city.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm wanting to do is I want to break it down by ward. Because again, you know,
this
like,
is city and we're here talking
I'll
about.
be, I'll be honest with you, I didn't elect, if I was, I didn't elect Pat Ertz. I did not vote for him. He's, another ward. I don't think I should have the power to vote to recall him because I never voted for him, I couldn't even vote for him legally in the first place. And so that's what I'm getting at, is that, so whatever number we decide, I'm fine with, the percentage-wise, but I do think there needs to be a distinction about aldermen and then the citywide positions.
But in recall,
Recalled, they're either recalled citywide or by ward.
Correct.
Yeah,
but the way this is worded, recall
Well,
petition shall be signed by qualified voters for that
He's recalled.
Or
office.
that voting district.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's for
voting
that
district.
office.
Voting district.
Okay, the last sentence I've added,
You
how
may
does this
be on.
sound? For an alderman, recall may only be initiated and decided by the qualified voters in the ward that
Isn't that what
alderman
that says?
represents.
yeah, or
Or, no.
you could just have what Jim just said, just label it as their voting district. So 30% of the total number of qualified voters registered to vote at the last regular municipal election in their voting district. I'm sorry, Mike.
It's already there. A recall petition shall be signed by qualified voters for that office. And the
Right.
number equal to, it's already there.
Well, if we had this whole
Ward one,
discussion, maybe
Ward
not
two,
everybody's
Ward
going to
three,
catch it in the
Ward four,
future.
Ward
So
five.
maybe we can just add those last few words.
But it's already there.
For
You
that
have to be a
office.
qualified voter for
And-
that office. So they can't do that to you unless they're a qualified voter.
But they should only be recalled by that district.
But that's what
For
it's
that
saying.
And
yeah,
that
I
could
mean,
mean that
that's
too.
what Mike's saying.
That would cover the
It says-
city, or it would cover you,
But
or
it seems
you,
a
or
little
anybody
bit,
else in their
so we can
particular
always qualify it
area,
specifically.
their particular ward.
But it's not obvious is the problem. And we
Well,
just had this whole
You're
discussion of why it
probably
wasn't
right. I
obvious.
wanted an attorney.
I don't know how much more obvious, I don't know how much more obvious it can be.
Can we highlight in that office?
Because it is for that office.
Okay, so just
I mean, that's-
forget everything we just went through. Okay, awesome.
God.
Well, I
all
tried to
the
get it in there
things.
before you went that far, but
Thank you,
Mike's just sitting
Michael.
there Like, guys, keep talking.
All right,
Louder. Beat him up.
all right, let's finish this up, and then take a
I know.
break. So,
Three, are we voting on three? We vote on three.
the question then still becomes, do we want to do 30% or
Well,
less
I'm gonna
for the total number of qualified voters registered?
Have we settled the alderman issue?
Yes.
Yes, where were you?
Mike fixed it.
Really now?
Mike made me look
Mike fixed
kind
He
of.
read
We're
the-
done.
no, I
No, it's-
didn't. I'm just trying to.
Well, I was confused,
What it
honestly.
says is recall petition shall be signed by qualified voters for that office.
Okay. That's-
I mean, that fixes it right there. That's what it means. If it's an aldermanic, then it's there. If it's a mayoral or a,
I didn't see it.
you know.
30% of the what now? Are we doing that?
Yeah, we gotta, I mean,
Picking on me now.
No.
it was 30% of the last
Dress
qualified
up.
election.
30% of the.
30.
I'm used to it.
30% of 16,
5,060.
So that's more than you'll have vote in the election.
The 30%.
But it doesn't relate to how many people actually vote. It's getting the,
In the ward, for
It's
instance,
gonna be a problem.
you want to put the recall just so high that it doesn't happen that often.
Here's the deal.
Door and get
That's
John
not the point
Doe,
of having
Jim
recall
Smith.
in here, though.
No, they have
You
to-
want it to actually be able to,
What's 30% of like 550?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Can you just
So you don't
give me
have-
that
30%
number?
of 550?
Yeah, there's a reason why I'm asking this question, 550.
Because that's the number in the ward. right?
165.
165, so if you had 30%, it'd take 165 to get me recalled. If you base it off 30% in the ward. Now, I'm not talking about citywide office. Citywide office, 30% is a really high number, I get it. But if you have 30% based off your alderman in the ward,
Is that how it's
Yeah,
written?
but you're going by the
Okay.
last municipal.
I know, but,
Just checking.
and that's what it says here, at the last regular municipal election.
It's needed,
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, I see.
I just want to put some numbers behind some of this stuff so we
So
can think
then
about
actually
it.
your 30%, your 5,000 numbers wrong.
So maybe the threshold should be different.
Well, no, the 5,000 would be right if it was a citywide
Citywide.
election.
Yeah.
So the threshold should maybe, in my opinion, should be maybe different for wards versus citywide.
Because it says for that office.
Citywide, for a citywide office.
Yeah.
And then for alderman.
Bring it up.
For the ward, bring it up higher.
Isn't
Yeah,
that
I
what
agree.
Michael said it's written as?
All right, how many qualified voters are there in Ward
He's not saying
5,
anything.
Ward 3, Ward 2?
Well, it's basically delineated by equal numbers of voters in each ward. So if you have
6,000.
16,867, you divide it by 5. Roughly
No,
3,370
no.
No,
No.
you used voters.
registered voters.
Right,
Right.
so
Qualified
16,000
voters, registered
divided by
votes. So you
5.
base it off
That's what I
registered
did.
votes.
Okay.
That's what I
It'll
did.
go up more.
Okay.
Yeah.
30% of that?
Because don't base it off voters, because that changes.
Well, that's what it is.
Registered voters.
Well, registered voters, I'm not
Okay,
talking
so
about registered
each
voters, not
ward
people who actually
the-
voted in the last municipal.
How
Yeah. Yeah.
many?
Each ward theoretically has roughly 3,400 voters,
All right.
registered
Hold on.
voters that vote.
Yeah, that makes sense, I
Or,
guess.
no, just registered voters.
16, 17.
So what's 30% of that?
About 1,000.
1,012.
So if you base it off registered voters as opposed to actual voters from the last municipal election.
Right.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean, that puts a number high
It
enough
does.
for you in your ward. So you could
Well,
just leave it 30%
Again,
for
I'm
both.
worried about, you know,
30% sounds
the
good.
threshold being
We're
too
done.
low.
Well, the number of recall votes that fail happens a lot, where they have recall elections and they're not recalled. And it's very expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive to go
Well,
through
because
that.
each of these things, you're gonna have a special election.
I'm
And that's
fine as,
costly to
I'm
the
fine as
city.
long as you base the number off registered voters again. We're good.
And I'd be curious, if you have a recall election, let's say for the Alderman Ward 2, is it still $20,000 for a recall election? Or is it just 1/5 of that? I don't know.
Because think about it, just like 3 locations, or maybe not that, maybe 1 location would be
Yeah,
helpful.
they only have one.
And it depends if it's a special election or not, you know, it could be
I don't know.
tied along to
They're
another
just
election.
questions. I'm
Yeah, these are all
curious.
questions. And that's the Jackson County Election Board maybe to help decide that one, I imagine.
Or
wouldn't
they
they?
may- or they
This is
may,
like
it
30
may,
grand an election.
yeah.
Well, but the point of that question is whether or not we're setting the number high enough to make sure they're not just spuriously.
Right.
Yeah, and if you base it off registered voters, it'd take roughly 1,000 per ward too, which I think is an appropriate number.
Right. Well, that's going to raise the question that you probably don't get 1,000 in a ward that vote.
That's right.
Right,
But
but
they
I
don't
mean,
have
it's
to
two
vote.
different
You just
numbers,
gotta
yeah.
go get a number, signature.
Yeah,
They just gotta be.
yeah, but see, they.
Only 550 voted voted in the last
What
election
was it in
for,
2005?
in April 2013.
I don't think we have
But if
those
you're only getting
numbers.
those people, then how are you gonna get those people?
Raytown is only so big, it hasn't
Well, they may not
expanded
show
or
up.
contracted any time
No, but I
recently,
mean, as far
so
as
it's
getting
roughly,
only-
Only Ward
2005
3
chart, I'm just curious.
people.
Oh, I don't know.
Means that you have to go door to door.
You should know, you wrote it.
Ward 3,
I should.
with Ward 3
Okay.
addresses.
Because I mean, it's not like you're gonna go to the grocery store and get all your Ward
Yeah,
3
you'd
people.
have to go
You
door
go
to
to the
door.
grocery
So
store.
that means it's gonna, yeah, like you're hinting here, I think it's gonna be, it's a tough process. And it should be
So to
somewhat.
keep people
It should be.
trivial with it.
Exactly. We're
Keep
wasting
people
20 grand
trivial
on
with it. There you go.
personal politics.
I mean, I don't mind when somebody really
If
is
you
an
get
issue, they
somebody,
wanna
if
come
you get
forward,
1,000
but
signatures against you in an
You're-
election
you're-
of 500, you're done.
Yeah,
You're gonna have 500 turnout. There's no way you could overcome that.
yeah.
And people are gonna sign their name where you can see that they signed that they don't want you and then you're finished. So in a way, you've kind of done a disservice to whoever has a petition against them. I
They didn't work hard enough.
I kind of get the feeling that it sounds like, let's set this to where nobody will ever use it. That's what it sounds like to me. And I don't think
No,
that's.
so somebody.
No,
somebody
no, I don't think so, Greg. I don't think you can look at it that way.
That's what you just said.
Use it for the first-
That's exactly what you just said, so nobody will use it.
Did you, I'm
Well,
curious,
but
Steve, did you see any other numbers besides 30%? I'm just
You don't
curious.
have it written in here.
the only other number that I
don't
saw
have it
that
written
was
in.
different was Blue Springs had 12
They base theirs
on the qualified voters
minute.
registered to vote at the
Oh, you
last meeting.
do, actually.
regular
I looked at the wrong thing, one moment. 15%. And then for recall, you put 1,500 registered voters for at-large officials, and 500 foreign wards.
When people find out how hard it is to get these signatures, most people don't have a clue as to what it's like to go out and have to campaign.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they're gonna have to do, exactly the same thing.
They're gonna have to have
Well,
a
like-
real reason.
Well, like
Yeah, that's
Charlotte
it.
mentioned earlier, she's like, look, it has to be this ward, so you have to go, honestly, door to door.
Yeah, because it
Within that
can't
ward.
be, oh, I'm standing out the grocery store and get all the registered
Yeah.
voters
Because half the people
to
don't
sign
know what
it
ward they're in.
because you don't
ask
like
them, "Are
Ward
you in
3
Ward 2?"
people.
They'll go, oh yeah, sure, let me sign.
Right,
And find out they're in Ward
right.
3 in Lee Summit or something, you know?
It's true.
Well, I do think that it's obvious that if the MML doesn't even put it in there, they think that there have been times when it's been misused in the first place. And I think that's what they're trying to avoid, is abuse.
I don't know, I think
And
it's
I did talk
widespread.
to Dave Markinson about this when I talked to him last week, and he just wanted to make sure that we would put the number high enough, is what he told me.
High enough for what?
That it was still attainable if absolutely necessary, kind of
And
thing,
not abused.
but not abused, exactly.
I don't think you'll ever see it attempted.
What if the number were closer to the number of people that voted?
Because the reality
I'm done
is,
with a compromise on the table, because if you do the math here, 15% is close to the number that you're talking about elected. You had to actually vote.
Yeah.
And if you have the total number of voters, presuming that they didn't all vote for you,
Yeah.
It may only be 45
But
votes.
here's the issue,
Signatures.
and I'm all about making a compromise here on this, obviously, but here's the thing, it's so much easier. If I had everybody who told me to come out and vote for me in April 2013, I would have had 1,000 votes. That's the thing, it's so much easier to go there and say, hey, sign this petition here. You know, that's the thing, I mean, I'm not even joking. I
To
was
get 'em to the vote.
Even though I won in a landslide, I was disappointed because I was like, well, where was this guy? And then when I got my voter history list, you know, it's like all these people just didn't even come out and vote, and they just don't come out in the April vote.
Same way with me.
Or you
Yeah.
could put 10% of the people who actually voted in the last election in that ward.
That's true.
No,
And then you'd have like,
Well, but
70
that's-
people.
You want to make it realistic.
Yeah, but
Keep
you
it
can
simple.
adjust the figure, make it more realistic than that percentage.
I mean, we could do 25% or 20%.
In a lot of the spring elections, when you have only aldermen running, sometimes you may only have 300 or 400 votes cast at all. And if you have,
That was me.
if you even have 350, at 10%, that's 35 signatures.
Yeah.
But
If you base it off,
45 is
based off,
only-
we're basing off registered though.
Yeah.
And they were very adamant about it, they'd show up to vote.
That's the thing though, we got it based off registered, so we're not worried about certain turnouts of election
Right.
cycles. And that's the way it needs to be, because every other charter has been consistent with that. I guess the question is do we keep it 30%, we lower it a little bit?
25% would be roughly a fourth of 33, so you're looking at 820, maybe 850 signatures.
I think we're gonna keep it 30.
For what?
Keep it at 30, yeah. If someone's serious about going after it, then they can go after it.
Well, and again, I mean, to me-
Don't argue a reduction on my account.
okay, well,
What are we doing, 25 and 30% of what now?
Of registered
25
voters.
Of the
Well, I just need a number.
3,360 that you
Oh, the
had.
3.
Yeah,
No, they'll call them their relatives.
yeah. I'm just saying too, though, that, I mean, I would want to put the number high enough that,
Gotcha.
Yeah, It wouldn't be abused.
So
It wouldn't be abused, but not so low that we might get 2 or 3 in the next election and then decide we have to amend the charter to raise it.
25% is 844, 30% is 1,012.
See, take
I
a
see.
straw poll on 30%, see how,
Okay, yeah. How many people are good with the 30?
Yeah, I mean, I'm,
I like
Yeah,
the
so-
25.
Argue
Now, these are
20 minutes, but I think-
registered
But I mean, we can,
voters for the ward.
yes. So for instance,
So what are you going to do
it would
for
take a
the
little,
city?
it'd take 1,000, it'd take 1,000
Say for the
votes.
mayor.
well, it's the
all
same.
there.
It's the same. It'd be citywide, so I mean, then you're talking 30% of 16 something, so over 5,000 signatures. So I mean, it,
That first sentence says for that office, so it means
Right.
city, what is, so.
Anybody that holds.
all right, so we're leaving it written as it is with 30% in there
Yeah, you'd need
They're
5
putting registered voters.
well, if
of the
they're
total
qualified.
number of qualified voters registered to vote. Yeah,
Keeping
just
in
as
mind
it-
that if you wanted to recall the mayor, that would take over 5,000 signatures. Just FYI, throwing it
Yeah,
out
well,
there.
that's,
Okay.
A lot of people.
Oh,
That's way more that's going to show up at any election,
Not if
We're-
you're adamant.
any election.
It's the same arguments, though.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Because you're getting people, you can stand out at Hy-Vee and get people
right.
to sign the thing there. Whereas the aldermen
low
have to
return,
make
I
sure
wouldn't
that
do
they go
that.
door to door to get their people saying, I hate Charlotte.
Do you feel that way?
jeez. So with the 30% number, per ward, it'd be roughly 1,000 signatures.
Right.
Just over 1,000. You'd need 5,000 for the city.
And 5,000 for a citywide office.
5,060 or something.
Yeah.
I told Mark it was 200.
Can someone motion something?
All right.
I
We
make a
have-
motion. We approve
Anything in
as
particular?
written.
second.
All right. Thank you, both. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, we'll take a vote.
Okay. Sandra Hartwell,
Yes.
Jim Asia,
Yeah.
Janet Emerson.
Yes.
Mike McDonough.
Yes,
Steve Gunther.
Yes.
Mary Jane Van Busker.
Yes.
Greg Walters.
No.
Ted Bowman.
Yes.
Lisa Emerson abstain. Mark Moore.
Yes.
Charlotte Melson.
Yes.
Jason Green.
Yes.
10-1.
10-1, motion carries. All right, let's take a quick break. Let's be back at 8:20, please.
That's 3 minutes.
All right,
3 minutes.
8:22.